This is Awaken to Rise with your host, Patty Palmer Livingston, and guest expert, Davyd Farrell.
Welcome back to Awaken to Rise. Our next guest is Davyd Farrell. Davyd is a quantum plant alchemist and healer. As a healer, he works in the astral realms to help heal clients at the energetic, spiritual, and emotional level. As a quantum healer, he has learned how to work with the higher intelligence of plants and nature, as well as within his own soul lineages, including that of the elven and angelic beings. He has spent many years training under different herbal, plant, and magic teachers, both in the traditions of his homeland, the British Isles and Ireland, and in the Amazon under a Quechua teacher. He is also a trained land healer and works with the conscious intelligence of the David realms for human nature harmony. He originally created and co-founded Plant Consciousness, the groundbreaking event that explored the higher intelligence of nature, before going to co-found Quantum Plant Healing. Through quantum plant healing, a system of global plant emergence were developed that allows people to actively participate and engage in plant diets that enable them to also learn the language of the plants and their healing and wisdom. He also co-founded Wisdom Hub TV, where he is the lead interviewer and content curator. Through his YouTube channel, he regularly releases various different types of podcasts, such as Web of Word, Beyond the Flow, Food as Medicine, and the Wachuma Sessions, and Moon and Mythos with the astrologer Kelly Hunter. Well, welcome, Davyd. Thank you so much for coming today and joining us. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into the quantum plant healing?
Sure. Well, look, thank you, first of all, Paddy, for inviting me to take part in your summit. It's a wonderful honor, and I'm happy to be able to come and talk about my favorite thing, plants and healing with plants and plant medicine. So where to start on the journey? I mean, wow, it's quite a long story. So, you know, I guess it really began about, let me think, back in probably 2012, when I found myself in a teepee somewhere in the countryside in Britain, drinking a strange jungle medicine, and suddenly having this conversation with a plant spirit, and that then led on the journey over many years, organizing things like plant consciousness and being involved, you know, in lots of different work with plants. And I was very blessed to have several teachers that time. I was working first of all with the wonderful Pam Montgomery, who was my plant spirit teacher, and then I worked with Carol Guyatt for a number of years too, you know, training with those wonderful ladies. And so I got to learn not just about the plants, but also about how to hold space, how to work with energy, how to do healing. And, you know, I had many teachers actually over the years, and they were all amazing. And I then I spent 5 years with Michael Dunning, the U shaman, which was really profound, you know, working with pretty much the oldest being on the planet. 260 million years the U tree has been here, you know, so what kind of wisdom does that being hold? You know, it's profound. And then I was blessed enough to spend 6 months in Ecuador, learning about the medicines of the jungle, ayahuasca, tobacco, and mayusa especially. And also had a wonderful magic teacher who taught me about how to work in the quantum space, how to work remotely, which is not something, if you'd asked me probably 10 years ago, I would have ever believed was possible. And in fact, I probably would have said the opposite. I would have thought it sounded woo-woo or something. And yet here I am, all these years later, doing this work and, you know, learning more about how we can work with the intelligence of these incredible beings, the plants. And, you know, really and truly, I have to say that I think that ayahuasca was the plant that opened that doorway, you know, to actually just remembering something, which was that I'd always loved nature.
Right.
You know, as a kid, I spent a lot of time out in nature, drawing pictures, hanging out with fairies, I think, being drawn to kind of magical little spots in the countryside, back in Devon and Cornwall. And, you know, I think that happens to many of us, that we get to a point in life where things shut down, maybe, you know, in childhood or as a teenager or whatever, and we forget about this connection we have to the mother. And I think it's really important at this time, as we're trying to find, you know, our way into a new timeline, a new Earth timeline, that we have that reconnection from the heart back to the, you know, to Mother Nature, and to remember that even if other things seem a little weird or flaky or maybe illusory, that, you know, we can step outside and see the great trees and just sit next to a tree and just feel at peace and just listen to the birds. And I think that that's just a great tonic for pretty much most things right now.
Right. Getting outside, being in nature. I agree. So what exactly is quantum plant healing?
Good question. So, okay, maybe this is a way of explaining a few things. So one of the processes that I did for many, many years in order to sort of get to this place was what I would call plant diets. And this is a tradition that comes out of South America, particularly working with the jungle plants like ayahuasca and tobacco and many different plants, actually. But the idea is that basically the student or the apprentice will go into the jungle, the maestro, the teacher will give the medicine, and they sit for 10 days, 2 weeks, several months, a year. It can be any different time frames. And all they drink is the brew of the plant that they want to get to know. And then eventually, through the process of having the consciousness expanded, then it opens up the more astral gateways, and then you can start to communicate with the astral aspects of the plant, or maybe even the higher mind aspects. And in through doing that, you sort of form this connection, or I kind of think of it sometimes like a telephone number that you then can sort of dial up, and you have the signature frequency of that being. But, you know, as I've discovered doing, some plants like nettle or mugwort, I've dieted with many, many times. And, you know, I didn't necessarily have to spend 10 days in the deep Amazon, drinking the juice that way. But what I learned from Carol and Pam was how to adapt that kind of system to working with native plants. And so then we used to hold retreats, and we would make a special elixir made out of, like, say the retreat was for hawthorn, maybe we would make a hawthorn tincture, we would make a hawthorn tea, a hawthorn essence, a hydrosol, and then we would like mix all of that into a special elixir. We probably put in like a base apple juice or something like that also, just to hold it, so, you know, over the weekend. And then what we would do for 3 days is fast and only drink the brew of the plant. And in this way, we flood the whole system with the energy and the healing qualities of the plant. So it's a really, really good way to get to know some of the healing aspects of a plant quickly. And of course, you know, one of the things that those experiences do is they bring up the things that need healing so they can be released. And so then we're basically getting better. So the plants are also showing us their healing qualities through doing the healing on us. So I learned a lot about plants in this way.
Yeah. In this time right now, is there certain plants that you would recommend that people be working with or taking, and like this?
Right. So, you know, the evolution of all of this process was the immersions, and myself and my partner Bella, we created quantum plant healing as a way of sharing this idea of looking at plants in a different capacity. So the idea is that over a period, we now do them over 13 days because we also work with the mind wave spells. But over 13 days, through a series of transmissions and talks, we encourage everyone who's participating in the immersion, which is kind of like a plant diet, but in a different form, to then go and source their own medicine. Like, so say with nettle, the one we're doing at the moment, you know, everyone has to go out and either forage or find their own medicine. So like with the tea, or they can make a tincture or an essence. So there's a lot of empowering through learning how to make the medicines which you can use on yourself. So you kind of start to build your own apothecary as well, which means that, you know, when you do have situations or symptoms that come up, you can reach into your own cupboard to get the medicine. You don't have to go and see somebody else for that. And there's something very empowering about that, Patty, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned nettle. You said it's a high-tech survival plant. Right now it's, you know, you said it's like what you put down everything that you could need in the next 3 months. Why is that one so important right now?
So nettle is basically like a superfood, and you know, it's so nourishing. It has over 40 trace minerals. Trace minerals are great because they kind of activate our brain, and they can actually tune us into galactic frequencies. But also nettle has this amazing capacity of releasing particularly heavy metals, toxins, all kinds of stuff actually. So anything that's in our system that's sludgy and dense or low frequency that could therefore attract other low frequency stuff needs to be flushed out, because, you know, we're at a point where we can't take the heavy stuff with us anymore because it's weighing us individually down, but also collectively. So we need plants like nettle to come in and help release. But what nettle also does is gives us a very strong sense of our boundaries so that we can start to hold our space much better. So this means that we don't get pulled into fiery situations, because nettle also has a lot of fire, right? And, you know, the energy of Aries and the equinox is upon us, and it's super strong. And so, you know, it's possible that at this time we could get triggered quite easily by situations, by revelations, etc., etc. And what nettle does gives us the capacity, even though it's this very fiery plant, it's amazingly good at holding water. So it's kind of like, not only can it absorb water well, but can actually hold it. So it's a bit like having our own personal reservoir tank. And so, there are many great, holding capacities that nettle has because of its ability to give us a solid boundary so that we don't leak energy, resources, nutrients, all kinds of stuff. So at the physical level, it has this kind of releasing capacity. It has this nourishing capacity. There's so many great minerals and nutrients. The famous story about Milarepa, the Buddhist ascended master. He spent 20 years in a cave, and the only thing that he drank was nettle tea every day with his disciples left outside of his cave. And 20 years later, he becomes enlightened, and I was like thinking about this when I was a Buddhist student for many years. And I was like, wow, if you sat with any plant, like for 20 years in the cave, you'd probably have quite a profound experience with that plant. But nettle has the capacity to nourish us. So he didn't lose weight like many of the great yogis may have done, because he was already nourished by the plant. So, if everything else was removed and all we had left to eat was nettle, that would be more than enough, right? And maybe we get a bit bored of it after a while, but, it has all of these.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes, and also, can you tell us a little bit about, you have dandelion, there's a couple other plants you work with too.
What's beautiful about this, Paddy, as well, is that we're talking about common plants, like, that people often perceive as something they might call weeds, right? But actually what we're looking at is incredibly powerful beings. So like dandelion, for example, they many years ago, tried to classify dandelion, all of its different variants, but there was literally thousands. And so this prompted a bit more of an investigation, and they realized that dandelion was able to adapt his DNA to survive anywhere pretty much. And so when we start to understand how the plant has these abilities in the 3D, in the chemical world, we start to get an idea of his abilities as a spiritual being. So we understand that dandelion actually is able to help repair our DNA. And one of the things we've been discovering through doing these immersions is some of the more hidden aspects of what plants can do, and also the damage that some of us are carrying, including corrupted or incoherent DNA. Now, there are many reasons why we could have this, and that's probably a conversation for another time. But if we are carrying DNA that is not coherent, let's just say it like that, then it means that some part of this is not fully integrated and not fully whole. And if dandelion's able at the energetic level to repair that in the quantum space or the etheric space, then by default, it has to come down into the 3D, because this realm is just but it's the manifestation of the energetic realms. So it's literally impossible for something that's done at the energetic realm not to manifest down into the 3D, unless there's lots of blockages and manipulations. And that's where the Artemisias come in. These are the plants that help clear all of the blockages, the hidden stuff, the shadow work.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Sometimes when I'm taking different things, I always wonder, is there a problem mixing these? I mean, are there ones certain ones you keep away from? One, if you're doing, like if you're doing dandelion, you can't do nettle or something like that. Does that come up at all because you're doing with the energy of it?
So it's a good question. It's one that people often ask in relation to this. So what I always say is, like, when I'm dieting with a plant specifically, like at the moment, like we're working with nettle, because that's what we're holding space for nettle. So I'm working deeply with nettle every day, taking tincture, taking tea. Even though I've taken this plant, I don't know how much in my life. I used to drink nettle tea every day many years ago. And, but I know the energy of nettle very well. And so it's okay for me to take other plants, which are just helping in the background. So I might be taking dandelion tea also just to help cleansing my liver. But because the plants work with intention, my instruction with the plants I'm working with is like, hey, nettle, I'm working with you right now. So any information that's coming in, I know is coming from you. But because I know dandelion so well too in the energetic space, I can tell the difference between when the plants are wanting to share information and where it's coming from. But in the early days, I would definitely suggest, like, if you want to get to know a plant at the energetic level, then just work with one. Okay, but if you just want to take plants for a healing purpose, that's different. If you need to take 5 plants for an illness or something, or a disease, then that's okay, because that's for healing. So it just depends on the situation mostly.
Oh, thank you. That's helpful. And then I think I thought was really curious. You said you work with these plants along with the astrology. How does that work?
So this is where, things for me anyway, got kind of cool. Was once I started getting more deeply into astrology about 3 or 4 years ago, and then I started watching Pam and quite a few other astrologers. And to be honest, I didn't really understand most of it. It was lots of angles and transits and things I couldn't get my head around. And then I started watching Pam, and she made things a little more simple. And I started to be able to understand astrology in a language that made sense to me, which was through feeling. So I tend to experience most things through being an empath and experiencing them as a sensation or as a frequency. So once I started to understand about the archetypes of planets, it kind of clicked for me, because I work a lot with correspondences anyway when working with plants. And then I really, of course, realized that there's a whole connection between plants and planets that goes back millennia anyway. And so it got me thinking, it's like, well, with the astrology, what I do every couple of weeks is I get my astrology diary out and I kind of map out like all of the major transits and energies that are going on. And then I use that as a way of sort of forming a picture energetically of how the next few weeks are going to unfold. And so accordingly, I try to make choices that are more in the flow with what's going on, rather than trying to push in a situation where the astrology doesn't support that action. But if I'm doing that in terms of manifestation, there might be a certain plant I want to work with. Or if I'm doing it for healing, maybe there's another plant that I want to bring in. And so that's when being clever and understanding, okay, like at the moment, the reason we're doing the nettle immersion at this time is because nettle's very connected to fire, to Aries, to Mars. But the particular mind wave spell that we're working with is also about healing. And so what we're understanding through the course of the immersion is not just that nettle came to give us strong boundaries, but also how to handle fire, how to harness water, and how to manage fire and water within our system. So, every time we do these immersions are always in sync with the astrology for a reason that has already been presented to us. But what's really cool and really magical is that the more deeper we go into the immersions, is the more we understand why it had to be this plant and at this time. And often we only get told maybe a couple of weeks beforehand, okay, we're going to do an immersion, it's with dandelion. And it's like, oh wow, how come we didn't get a warning? And it's like, well, it's now. We didn't realize until now, but now you need nettle.
Right.
So it's kind of a magical process.
You're mentioning immersions. So can you explain what an immersion is? Because I know you're going through one right now with nettle, but so that our listeners understand what you mean when you say that.
Sure. So we created these, like I said, these kind of containers, energetic containers within the quantumplanthealing.com website. And within that, we're able to share discussions. We have a lot of, like I said, interviews, transmissions. And so through the course of taking the medicine and listening to the transmissions, it then takes the participant on a journey, and they start to feel the effects of the medicine, the plant that we're working with, in their own life. And because of all of the transmissions, we're giving kind of, I guess, like signposts or gateways, or we're receiving downloads. Often when we're doing these immersions and the transmissions, it's just channeling. The plants are channeling through us and sharing what they want each individual to hear. And, I spent several years as a Buddhist student, first in India and then in Italy. And so I had the privilege of receiving transmissions from lamas. And it's only now, many, many years later, that I can still feel the effects of some of them coming into my awareness, because now I'm able to receive that information. And it's the same with the plants. Like, they give a whole spectrum of information, but according to what we can receive at that time, it will unfold. So for everybody, the journey is different, but still the plant is giving each person what they need in that moment. So it's almost like your own tailored healthcare service, really. It's amazing.
So when you're doing immersion, you're taking a group of people through an experience with a particular
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. So normally also we do a series of live calls in the start, the middle and the end, where we're giving instructions. We also have sharing what's coming up for people. We have a discussion group where everyone's able to go and share. People have got really cool in their sharings, like writing stories, poems, sharing artwork, people painting pictures of what's going on. Yeah, it's really, it's a very creative space. And we also have the attitude within what is rapidly expanding community that everybody has a voice, everybody gets heard. And so when we do the live calls, it's a space that we all share, and that many of us have done the immersions together now, have been on this journey over it's almost 8 months now with all of these plants. And so there's a real bond there as well, and new people coming in and jumping straight in, or they're going back and doing the previous immersions. And so it's wonderful to see all of these people, a lot of them coming actually from the videos with Pam.
I'm one of your new ones here. I can't wait to try.
Right.
I'm
so
looking forward to that.
Well, what's cool is that's actually given us a community that has a lot of astrologers or people that are into astrology who understand about the flow of energy and dynamics, and that there is something greater. So that makes a lot of the work with the plants a lot easier to explain, because a lot of it is through synchronicities, through observations. And, one of the great gifts of dandelion is, apart from his DNA abilities, that he really shows us that there's only one moment, and that is now. That's it. There is no past going on. There is no future. Even the past is actually simultaneously affecting the present. And so what dandelion shows us, the more we're in the present and the more we open our eyes, the more we start to see. And the more that we see, the more that we start to understand all of the answers we need to pretty much anything in a fractal world are completely around us already. We just didn't have our eyes open enough to see that.
And that's what's
So
going
this
on
is why
right
we
now.
have Dandelion as the first immersion, because he really gets us into that way of being in the present moment and not thinking about your holiday in 3 weeks or what the hell happened with one of your family members 7 years ago or whatever. You know, it's reminding us that the only thing is now. And that's, you know, if we can be present, then the now kind of it keeps expanding. And so our awareness expands with it. So this is, you know, the more subtle but powerful effects that a plant like Dandelion can have on how we live our life.
Wow. So, okay. So if you were to give one tip to the people today, what would be the one thing, if they could just start with one thing, what would you suggest?
Go outside, find a dandelion plant in a clean place and make yourself a cup of tea. And
How would you do that? Would you just pick one and?
Sure. So let's just say that you can find dandelions, and they are starting to come out now in certain parts of the Northern Hemisphere. Obviously, don't pick any plants next to a busy road or maybe where the local animals like to go to the toilet or anything like that. You want to find a nice clean place where the plant looks healthy and happy. And you can approach the plant and just say, hey, you know, I'd love to connect with you, to feel some of your medicine or your energy. Is it okay if I pick a few leaves? And, you know, my teacher Pam used to say we had a ping FUD method. If you get like a ping, yeah, that feels good. Okay, yeah, sure, take a few leaves. If you get like, oh, no, like FUD, then it's like, nah, maybe not. But sometimes in the old days, plants would say, hey, yeah, you can, just not me. Try picking from that plant. So this is where we can also immediately start to sink into a more intuitive feel about the environment we're in. This is, again, another beautiful quality of dandelion. It makes us feel into every little thing that's going on for us, which is also another great way of getting really attuned to your energy field and the frequencies that shouldn't be there and the ones that feel good. And this is a big part of the Artemisia, because when our field is clogged with attachments or bad energies or God knows what, the whole plethora of things to choose from at the moment, then what that does is it makes our field incoherent, and it makes it more difficult for us to discern which bits of us are actually us, because there's so much stuff in our field that's not actually us.
Right.
But once we get the field clear, we get a lot more sensitive. So then when unhelpful frequencies do enter our field, we're able to go, oh my gosh, I'm not feeling so good. You know, I just went to the supermarket, didn't really like the vibe so much. And so this is where the daily hygiene piece comes in. You know, my practice is always now really after going anywhere busy is to come home, get my pendulum and start asking a few questions. Did I pick up anything? Do I need to clear my field? Did I get misaligned? Do any of my chakras need to be fine-tuned? In that way, I'm kind of constantly keeping up my own maintenance and my energy field. It's kind of my spiritual responsibility to myself to stay in good, happy shape.
Wow.
Right?
Okay, so you do that daily too, if you feel you need to, if you've been exposed.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the level of toxicity that we're dealing with, Patty, in the general environment is deep, and it needs cleansing. And so the best way to do that is to start acknowledging it and working with the plants to cleanse. And, you know, once we get the idea that we can ask questions with our pendulum, you know, in the appropriate ways, we can also start to communicate, at least initially as well, with plant spirits through our pendulums by asking simple questions. Hey, dandelion, is it okay if you have a conversation right now? If you get a yes, okay. Hey, is it possible that you might be able to help me with some liver issues? Yeah, great. What should I do? Should I take a tea? Should I take some essence? And so we're already getting into the mindset that we're communicating with something through our own body medicine. So you can also do that with your fingers as well, right?
Yeah.
So this is a great tip. If you want to start, go outside, meet dandelion, meet nettle, meet a simple plant. I mean, nettle is a great tea. It's full of really, really good stuff. And a lot of the good stuff in nettle right now is actually going to help keep out the gunk and junk, as we call it. You know, the sort of the collateral toxicity that we pick up pretty much every time we go anywhere busy. And if you live in an urban environment, particularly a big city, that toxicity is kind of at an all-time high, I think. So, so this is what we can do. You know, these are the positive actions we can take, sort of Aries style, for ourselves, you know, so that we can stay in good shape. Who doesn't want to feel calm, centered, and happy?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Wow. So much information. So is there anything else you'd like to add today? About
yeah, there's a lot I could add. Let me just think, you know, how much longer do we have, Paddy? I don't want to run over our time limit. Let me know.
You're good. I mean, you can share away. Okay,
cool. So yeah, so a lot of people after watching the videos with Pam often email me and say, hey, I want to get into interviewing plans, learning how to communicate plans, all the same sort of things that you're asking. And in the old days, it used to be that we would run a retreat and people would come and they go through an experience for 3 or 4 days. That's all got a lot more difficult in the last couple of years for all the reasons that we know. And, you know, what that's forced us to do is to work with the technology, which for a lot of us plant people is not really our favorite medium, right? You know, sometimes even for some people, their computers can blow up if they get too close to it and all that kind of stuff. But, one of the things my magic teacher, David Leasley, told me, said, everything has a consciousness. Even your computer, your laptop has a consciousness. Everything can be balanced. And so once you get into this mindset of understanding everything is frequencies, you can start to negate many unhelpful frequencies just by recalibrating how you are compatible with the environment around you. So we can do that with our computers. We can do that definitely with our mobile phones. And in this way, we're reducing a lot of the background low-level frequency stuff that might be, if you think about that, our bodies are mostly water, and think about all of these electrical charges, right. Wi-Fi, 5G, and God knows what else, right? It's all kind of disturbing the waters in our body. And we've been talking a lot about this in the nettle because we're understanding the importance of the structured water in our body and the need for it to be without, harmful or traumatic imprints. Because if we have traumatic imprints in our body, then it's going to keep attracting the same energy. So we're understanding through working with nettle that a lot of what nettle wants to do is clean the waters of our body so that our body is nice, clean, structured water without any of those incoherencies. And so, what I often say to people is like, if you want to get to learn to meet plants, always remember that, if you have a garden, the plants that you need are in your garden waiting for you. And, this is well known in herbalist circles. And I often used to wonder how this was. And then I met a very cool medicine man from South Africa who's now unfortunately passed, but he shared something that really caught my attention. He said, I believe that the gut flora in our stomach at a quantum level is able to communicate with the microbiomes in the soil and actually give it information from my body intelligence. Says, hey, like Davyd, needs a bit of a level cleanse right now. He's been on the whiskey a bit too much over Christmas and he needs to flush that out. So the dandelions appear in the spring or whatever. And it's like, we sort of take that for granted. But if you allow the garden to do its thing, you will find that plants that you haven't seen before will spring up. And if you're smart, you'll maybe go into the reference books and say, hey, what does this plant do? Oh my gosh, this plant's really good at cleansing the kidneys, maybe. Holy smokes, maybe I need to cleanse my kidneys after a long, sludgy winter. And so, again, we can start to have this dialogue with the environment around us. And so suddenly you realize that everything has spirit and consciousness and you can communicate with anything, in its own way. And of course, having a conversation with a plastic table or, whatever, some props is going to be a little tricky and probably it's not going to be a super deep conversation. But, all of these kind of materials, this was originally a tree, so everything has some kind of spirit, everything has something that we can connect to. So I think the more that you can, the more you can approach life like this, the more magical it becomes.
Yes, and we're also becoming very present. You have to be present to be experiencing that and tuning in.
Exactly. And again, dandelion, the more present we are, the more we can receive, the more we can absorb, the more we can expand ourselves. Jupiter is in Aries right now, supporting all of this, right?
Can I go back to the dandelion real quick? So the flower that do you boil it? It's like if I were to go out in my backyard and I have a dandelion, you said leaves. Do you take the leaves or the flower or?
Good question, actually. Well, with dandelion, the only part of the plant you probably don't want to use is the seed head, but the root has its own qualities, the leaves have their own qualities, and the flowers have their own qualities. So with dandelion, you can pretty much use all of the plants, and each part of the plant will have a slightly different healing effect on you, all within a certain sort of spectrum that dandelion does. But also when we're working with the plants in nature, we sort of track the energy. So in the winter, all of the energy goes back into the roots, everything's below the ground. And then in spring, the energy comes up with the shoots. So all the energy is in the shoots and the leaves. So we want to take those parts and it comes into the flowers. So we want to use the flowers. And so we're always kind of tracking the energy of the plant as it's moving through the plant. Well, there's also, you can take that even further. You want to pick the plant at a certain time of day when the water is up, so the plant is more full with the nutrients. And so you can keep, this is the beautiful thing about the fractal world, is you can just keep going more and more into the details and being more and more precise about what you're doing. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is to get out in the garden and meet dandelion, see the beautiful sunny flower, that follows the sun throughout the day. And when you spend time with dandelion, as the Ascended Master Zach was talking about, one of the videos I did with him, this is a plant that's really, really cheerful. And right now I feel like we all need a bit of sunshine in our lives, right? It's been quite a long winter. It's been quite a challenging few years, and everyone needs a bit of a lift. And so this is a plant that can really lift your spirits as well. And so, I tell you what is really tasty is if you get dandelion flowers and you put them in some batter and you fry them in a pan with a little bit of garlic and butter. That's pretty good.
Oh, no. Well, the reason I'm asking is I think I have a couple in my backyard. I'm like, I've been feeling right now with everything going on, I feel very pulled to be outside a lot. So every day I try to get outside barefoot, try to get out there and really ground.
Well, another beautiful way to connect, which is really quite simple, and I actually make a little video of this on the dandelion immersion, is to make your own essence, a vibrational medicine. All you have to do is find a nice dandelion flower in the garden or plant, put the bowl of water, and with intentions connect with dandelion and say, I'd love to get to know you better. Are you willing to share your medicine in this essence with me? And if you're, again, using the ping thud, or you can use your pendulum, if you get a yes, then you just sit there, hold space, and you ask that as much of the dandelion wisdom as possible can be in that water. When you feel like the process is finished, you add alcohol. It's 100 ml of water to 100 ml of alcohol. And then you've got yourself a mother essence, and you can make lots of homeopathic style dosage bottles from that. And that's the vibration of the dandelion captured, or harnessed rather, not like captured, but harnessed in the water. So again, we're learning that water has this incredible capacity to harness and hold information, whether it's in our body, whether it's in the water with plants, whether it's with intention, like Emoto showed us.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about the water right now. Yeah.
Well, we got Saturn moving into Pisces, or it's already moved into Pisces, actually, right? And so we're on that journey of the next couple of years. Like, how do we, I've been talking about this quite a bit during our immersion. I feel that Nettle in its own way is a bit like an ark, and if Saturn is the ark floating on the oceans of water of Pisces, of the consciousness, we want to make sure that we're not going to lose ourselves, or that we're going to sink or drown, right? So we want to make sure that our boat, our ark, our field is nice and tight and able to secure us across this incredible journey that I think we're all on right now to the promised lands, whatever that is for us, So I feel like water is going to be a big thing, Patty, over the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, I agree. Totally agree. Wow, David, that was wonderful. I completely enjoyed this. So I know you have an offer you wanted to give out to the guests, people listening today. What do you want to explain a little bit about that for us?
Bless you. Thank you. Yes. So because the dandelion immersion is probably the best place to start, and if people want to get to know how to work with plants and to experience their wisdom and their healing, the dandelion really is the best introduction to that. So what we wanted to do was offer your audience both the dandelion, which is the first immersion, and the Artemisia, which is the second one in the sequence, at a discounted rate of 20% off either as individual immersions, or we also have a bundle that you can find whether if you buy them together, it's slightly discounted as well. So you can use the special coupon code of DANDART, all capital letters, DANDART 20, DANDART 20, and you can enter that in the coupon code on any of the purchase pages for those immersions.
We'll have that down below the video too for you.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Cool. Wow. Thank you so much for all your time and all your wisdom. This was amazing. I learned a lot. I look forward to learning more. Anyways, thank you so much and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Hope to see you sometime soon. Ciao.